Today is a very special day. Anybody know what today is? It is Star Wars Day, May the 4th, right? May the 4th be with you. So listen, it's a pretty big holiday. I don't know how you and your family are planning on celebrating, but from the bottom of my heart, I hope you have the best Star Wars Day ever. It also is our third Sunday of Easter. And if you weren't here last week, maybe you grew up in Easter's one day, but we've been following the church calendar this whole year here at Bridgepoint. And one of the awesome things about the church calendar is that Easter is not just one day, it is a 50-day celebration of the resurrection of Jesus and then fleshing out what are the implications of that for my life and your life. And so I'm really excited that we're just picking up in the story where we left off last week. If you've been tracking with us on Easter Sunday, we talked about the first half of John chapter 20. Last week, we talked about the second half of John chapter 20. Today, we're going to begin John chapter 21. If you have your Bibles, you can go ahead and turn there. But we are picking up kind of in part 3 of a story. So I'm going to have to ask you to give me about 10 minutes at the very beginning to do a little recap, to catch up, to make sure we're all on the same page. Because if you're not on the same page, today's going to seem really strange. Today's going to seem like a lot of self-help and just believe in yourself, and those are all good things, but the message is so much bigger and broader than that if you don't understand the context. It kind of reminds me of, anybody ever seen those posts explaining movies badly? So in honor of Star Wars Day, I have one here for us. Star Wars is described as a terrorist group tries to overthrow a government by bombing their headquarters, all right? We have another one here. A couple of thieves discover their immortality after successfully living through a gauntlet of death. That's, of course, Home Alone. And then the last one I have here for us. A man who is lying about his age abducts 3 children. That is Peter Pan. So while not incorrect, also not painting the full picture. Does that make sense? And this is a problem not even just for this series, but in general. Like, I think a lot of us have grown up, and what we think the story of the Bible is like, hey, we've all sinned, we've incurred the wrath of God, and he needs to punish sin. So he sent his son Jesus to die on the cross in our place. And if you believe in Jesus' death and resurrection, then when you die, you go to heaven. And if you don't, then you go to hell. And while there's parts of that are true, that is like a gross mischaracterization of the story of Scripture. Now, I know people during the recap, the tendency is like pull out your phone, play solitaire, or go to sleep. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But in order to make this exciting, I don't just have charts today. I literally named this Charts 3.0. All right, I have charts that combine everything we've talked about for the last couple of weeks. So I want you to pay close attention and see if you can notice how these charts are different from the normal chart. Who's excited about charts today? What a better way to celebrate Star Wars Day. All right, so of course you know the story of the Bible begins with God creating the heavens and the earth. And so as part of this creation, he carves out a garden in a place called Eden. And Eden is described in several different ways. It is this elevated place. It's like lifted up off the earth. But it's also where the divine and the human interact. And it's really described as a temple, so to speak. It is heaven on earth. And it's here that God puts his people, Adam and Eve. And think about what Adam and Eve are doing in Eden. They are walking with God. They have this intimate relationship with him. They have this vulnerability with one another. They're naked and unashamed. I mean, they're not like toiling out. Like, they walk up to any tree and just grab the fruit off the tree. So this, it's like this great life, but they're not just sitting there doing nothing. God has actually told them, I want you to go out and subdue the earth. Like the heaven on earth you're experiencing here in Eden, I want you to go and bring this everywhere. He actually tells them, I want you to work in the world and watch over it. By the way, those same 2 words in Hebrew are describing the work of the priests later on in the Old Testament. So again, you get this like temple imagery here in Eden. Now, this is all well and good, but you know the story. God says you can eat from the fruit of any tree, but not the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And if you tell somebody not to do something, what is the one thing that they are guaranteed to do? The thing you told them not to. And that's what happens with Adam and Eve. They eat from the fruit of this tree, and when they do, they have to leave Eden. And the picture we get is like heaven and earth are split apart. And this is kind of this is where you're about to see, here's some of the new pictures that are coming in. The problem is not just that heaven and earth are split apart, but all of a sudden, sin has been unleashed in the world. The power of sin is at work, trying to throw God's creation back into chaos. It's polluting the whole world and relationships. And now we are stuck like committing sin over and over and over again. So the world is polluted. Now at this point, like this matches the other story that we believe about the Bible. But the reality is God doesn't look at this situation and say, wow, they messed up the world so much. It's so full of sin. I can never bring heaven to earth. No, God is bigger than any of our mistakes. And so what he does is he says, I'm going to bring heaven to earth, and I am going to do it through my people. And so in the Old Testament, we hear the story of God's kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, this people who are supposed to live in such a way that the world sees what heaven on earth looks like. So they love God and prioritize him. They love their neighbors. They're going to be forgiving debt and letting slaves go free. But are they going to be able to live this heaven on earth life on their own? That's not a trick question. They're not going to be able to do that because all they've ever known is this world of sin. That is the default for all of us. It's just to lie, cheat, steal, to sin, to put ourselves first, to image ourselves into the world. That is our default mode. They can't do it themselves. They need someone to help them. So who is going to help them? God is going to help them. All right. I thought I was tired this morning. All right. God's going to help them. But if God is holy and cannot be contaminated by the pollution of sin, then we have a problem on our hand. How is God going to be with his people? Well, the answer comes through the Old Testament sacrificial system. So a lot of the ways that I tend to think about sacrifice is, okay, God's really mad and his wrath needs to be avenged, and so we've got to kill something to appease God. That is not the way Leviticus talks about these sacrifices. In fact, most of the sacrifices are meals. They're like grain offering or Thanksgiving offering. But there are some offerings that are specifically called atonement offerings. And I have a love-hate relationship with this word atonement. Because when I think I have to atone for something, I feel like I have to make up for something. I have to cover my tracks. I have to pay somebody back. But the word atonement is a word that when it was created by smashing two words together, at one. So atonement is at one meant. I think I have this up here. So it just means to bring two things that were separate back together. So God is trying to come back together with his people. That's what the atonement sacrifices are doing. So we got to clear off some space for God to live. What do? We bring an animal into the temple. And there's so much happening with the sacrifices, like maybe we'll do a series on it one day. But the first thing we notice is that when you kill the animal, you're supposed to be reminded, like, sin always leads to death. But not only that, they collect the blood and they start to sprinkle the blood on the ground. The blood washes away the pollution of sin. And then the rest of the meat is cooked and it is offered as a sacrifice either to God, or a meal for God, or the priest, or for the people who are offering it, which I think is so beautiful because when you have a meal with somebody, what are you doing? You're connecting with them. You're building your relationship with them. In fact, a couple of years ago, my wife and I went on maybe my favorite date ever. We were celebrating our 15th anniversary, so to do it up big, we decided to go to one of those fancy restaurants. It wasn't Mexican, I know, surprising. We went to a restaurant where it had like actual courses, and I didn't realize that at first. I was like, oh, this menu's not as expensive. I was like, oh, we order 7 things on here? Like this is, I'm doing mental math in my head. But the reason we went there is because we wanted the meal to take a long time. Because there is a questionnaire called the Proust questionnaire. I was corrected on my pronunciation after the last service. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's Proust. It's a list of like 36 different questions that authors are supposed to use to answer about the characters they're writing. And if you can answer all those questions for your characters, you have created a fully formed individual. Well, what we did is we actually went through those questions and asked them to each other. And we started to learn things about each other and share stories that we had never, and we've been married for 15 years at this point. So that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, just free date night tip. You never know what you're going to get when you show up to church. But it's this idea that when you share a meal with people, you are connecting with them. And so all of this is happening in the temple or in the tabernacle, right? Like there's this imagery that, hey, we're back in Eden. where we have this relationship with one another, this relationship with God. Heaven has come to earth. In fact, the temple itself was decorated to look like the Garden of Eden. Now, this is all well and good, but when you leave the temple, you go back out into the polluted world, right? And so what do? You slip back into your old habits, patterns, and behaviors. And so God gets so frustrated. He's like, you guys bring me sacrifices and you cleanse the temple, but I don't need the sacrifice. What I want is I want you to give me your heart. I want you to give me this like inward change, and the people refuse. And so after this goes on for many, many, many years, God says, I'm not going to force myself on you. He removes his protection. Israel's enemies come in, conquer them. The Babylonians destroy the temple. So all of a sudden we're back to heaven and earth have been ripped apart again. Now later the Persians will actually allow the Jewish people to rebuild their temple, but there's this big question on their mind. Okay, the temple system is here. We can meet with God, but that's not fundamentally the problem. The fundamental problem is with us. Like something has to change within us. And so the prophets look forward to a day when God would send a Messiah who would bring his kingdom to earth once and for all. And when he did, not only would his kingdom come, he would change the lives of all of God's people. This is the way Ezekiel puts it in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 26. God says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will remove your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. So when this Messiah comes, he will fundamentally set all of us free from the power of sin in our lives. Are we tracking so far? The painful part's almost done, I promise. So we get to the New Testament, and the gospel writers want us to see that Jesus is this Messiah. So John chapter 1 begins, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and then the Word became flesh and dwelt among people. The Greek word for dwelt is the word tabernacled. Jesus is the place where heaven and earth meet. A few verses later, John the Baptist says, hey, there's the Lamb of God who takes away the sin, not just in the temple, but the sin for the whole world. Like he's the one we've been waiting for. So like everywhere Jesus goes when he's healing people and casting out demons and raising people from the dead, these aren't like tricks to prove his divinity. Like he's actually doing the work of bringing heaven to earth, to putting things back in order. When he teaches, he's not just teaching random morality. He's teaching, here's what it looks like when you live as a true image of God and you actually live out what heaven on earth looks like. And what did this get Jesus? It got him killed. He was murdered on the cross. 3 days later, he rose again. And so the New Testament authors then look at this event where Jesus' blood then becomes the blood that washes sin from the whole world. His resurrection then reminds us that one day heaven is going to come to earth in full, and there is nothing anybody can do about it. Because the worst thing that can ever happen, like we could be killed. If somebody wanted to stop you, they could kill you, right? Like how many books or movies are like people traveling back in time to stop Hitler, some monstrosity. If we just kill him, then we can stop all this. They killed Jesus, and he came back. Right, like you cannot stop heaven from coming to earth. And when we put our hope and trust in Jesus, then we get that new heart. We become that new creation. And we have the hope that one day we will be resurrected just like Jesus to live in the new heavens and the new earth. Does all of that make sense? That is all background to get to John chapter 21, verse 1. That's where we're going to jump in this morning. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. He revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called twin, Nathanael from Cana of Galilee, Zebedee's sons, and 2 others of his disciples were together. I'm going fishing, Simon Peter said to them. We're coming with you, they told him. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. When daybreak came, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not know it was Jesus. Friends, Jesus called to them, you don't have any fish, do you? No, they answered. Cast the net on the right side of the boat, he told them, and you'll find some. So they did, and they were unable to haul it in because of the large number of fish. The disciple, the one Jesus loved, said to Peter, it is the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he tied his outer clothing around him, for he had taken it off, and plunged into the sea. Since they were not far from the land, about 100 yards away, the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish. So let's stop here for a moment. Stop here at least so I can catch my breath here. What's going on? This seems like strange, especially coming off last week, because this is the third time Jesus has appeared to his disciples. Do you remember the first time we read about last week? The disciples, including Simon Peter, had locked themselves in a room because they were afraid of the Jewish religious leaders. Why? Well, because they had just executed Jesus. And if they did that to Jesus, they're probably coming after his followers next. And so they're in this room, they're full of fear, and all of a sudden Jesus appears. I don't know if he floated through the door, or they turned around and he was there. I don't know. But he's there. And we talked about, he does a couple of interesting things. The first thing, he breathes on them. And that's really reminding us of back in Genesis when God forms man out of the dirt and breathes the breath of life. Jesus is saying, hey, there is new life in you, this new heart. Like I've changed you fundamentally who you are. Your identity is now changed because of me. And then he says, I'm sending you out in the world the same way my Father sent me. And so Peter's reaction to that then is to go fishing? That seems kind of strange, right? And this is for Peter. This is not like, hey, I just need a little R&R after a crazy week. Peter's not taking sabbatical. Why would Peter go back fishing? Well, remember when we first meet Peter, what is his occupation? He is a fisherman. And by the way, we do this in our culture. They did it in their culture too. We tend to identify with our career. Like what you do ends up becoming part of your identity. When we first meet people, we say, hey, what do you do for a living? We talk about our friends. We say, oh, my friend Matt, he's in medical sales. My friend Jamie, he works for Parks and Rec. This is how we will introduce people because who we are, our identity gets wrapped up in what we do. And so for Peter, he was a fisherman. This was his family's business, probably his father's business. He knew how to fish. Well, one day he had been out in the boat. He'd been fishing all night. He caught nothing. And so he comes in and he's cleaning his nets. He's probably discouraged. Jesus happens to be walking by. He says, hey, Peter, can I hop in your boat? Can you push me out a little bit while I teach these people? This is the shortened Matt Spear version of this story, by the way. And so he pushes Jesus out. And when Jesus finishes teaching, he says, hey, Peter, did you try throwing the net out on the other side of the boat? And I got to believe, Peter's probably a little insulted by this question because Peter's a fisherman. This is his livelihood. This is his life. He knows how to fish. And you don't even have to be a fisherman to know if I put the net on this side of the boat and didn't catch anything, it's not going to change if I put it on this side of the boat. I'm probably still not going to catch anything. And he's got to be thinking, Jesus, you're a teacher. You're a rabbi. I don't tell you how to teach. Don't try to tell me how to fish. But you know what? I'll humor you. He throws the net on the other side of the boat, and what happens? It's like that scene from Finding Nemo, right? Like all the fish swim in the net, and the net's starting to break, and the boat's starting to go under. Peter's got to call his friends James and John to bring their boat over to help. And all of a sudden, in an instant, everything changes. Because Peter realized he might knew how to fish, but Jesus knew the actual fish. All his identity was wrapped up in what he did, but all of a sudden he realizes the true identity of the one who is standing before him. And so he drops to his knee. He said, I'm sinful, man. I'm not even worthy to be in your presence. And Jesus says, Peter, I want you to follow me. And in that moment, Peter adopts a new identity. He's no longer Peter, the fisherman. He is Peter, the disciple of Jesus. And Peter's with Jesus every step of the way. Every time there's a miracle, Peter's there. When Jesus is teaching, Peter's there. When Jesus takes a select few disciples and goes up on the mountain and is transfigured, Peter is there. In fact, it's even at the last meal they have together, Peter is there. And Jesus just point blankly says, guys, here's what's about to happen. I'm going to be betrayed. They're going to kill me. 3 days later, I will rise again. And Peter, this does not compute in his brain. Wait a second, Jesus, we thought you were bringing God's kingdom. You were going to liberate us from our enemies. How are you going to do that if you're dead? So Peter says, Jesus, I'm not going to let that happen to you. I'm going to defend you even to my own death. Jesus looks at Peter and says, oh, Peter, you don't even know. Before this night is over, you're going to deny me not once, not twice, 3 times. They leave that meal, they go out into a garden, and that is where they come to arrest Jesus. And I am sure Peter was determined to prove Jesus wrong. So the soldiers show up, and what does Peter do? He gets his sword out and starts swinging. He chops a guy's ear off, which tells me Peter probably wasn't great with a sword, to be honest with you. And then you get this weird thing where Jesus turns to Peter. He's like, Peter, what are you doing? Put your sword away. That's not how my followers are supposed to act. He picks the ear up, he puts it back on the young man and heals him, and then they take Jesus away. And so Peter's going to be so disoriented at this point. He doesn't know what on earth is about to happen. So as they take Jesus before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council, to stand trial, Peter follows behind. Now remember, they've been up all night praying. And so this is in the moments right before dawn. So it is still dark out. Assume the morning air is a little cool. And so some people have started this charcoal fire. They're sitting around the fire. Like, I don't know, like, to me, like, I can just sense it, right? You got the cool breezes blowing. You can feel the heat. And the charcoal fire had to smell good, right? Because charcoal, that's my favorite part about spring, summer, and fall, is we're grilling out and we're firing up the charcoal grill. It is awesome. And so just imagine the sights and the smells. And as they're sitting around the fire, watching what's happening to Jesus in the not too far off, all of a sudden they start to look at each other. And the flames are lighting their face a little bit, but you can't quite make out who it is. And all of a sudden somebody looks at Peter and says, hey, aren't you one of his disciples? Peter says, I have no idea what you're talking about. Somebody else leans in and is like, yeah, I swear I've seen you with Jesus before. Says, no, I've never seen this guy before. Finally, a third person, yeah, I remember you were there when he fed those thousands of people, right? And he stands up and says, I don't even know the guy. Leave me alone. And all of a sudden, the rooster crows. The dawn begins to break. Peter realizes what he's done. And I wonder if in that moment he looked through the flames of the fire and he saw Jesus looking back at him, and his heart breaks, full of shame, guilt. And so the disciple who'd been there for everything leaves. So when Jesus is beaten, mocked, forced to carry his own instrument of death outside of town, Peter wasn't there. When they nailed him to the cross and he breathed his final breath, Peter wasn't there. When they took his body down and wrapped him up and put him in the tomb, Peter wasn't there. But Peter was there in the upper room. He was there when Jesus breathed new life on him. And yet sometimes we can be told that we have this new life from Jesus, but because of our own guilt and shame, we go back to our old identity because that's what's comfortable. We go back to our old identity because we don't feel like we're worthy to live out this new creation type of life. And so full of guilt and shame, Peter goes back to what he knows. But thankfully, Jesus knows where he's going to be. And so he's walking on the shore, and when Peter realizes it's Jesus, even though he has guilt and shame, he wants to be close to him, so he just jumps in the water and he swims ashore. Which the other disciples, like, let's be honest, they're probably a little ticked off about this, right? Like, you ever have a party before, and there's always that one person who leaves right before everybody cleans up, and you're like, mental note, don't invite them to the party again. Right? They got all these fish in the boat, and Peter just leaves them to deal with it. And so Peter gets to shore, and that's where our story continues, verse 9. When they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire there, with fish lying on it and bread. Bring some of the fish you've just caught, Jesus told them. So Simon Peter climbed up and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. Even though there were so many, the net was not torn. Come and have breakfast, Jesus told them. None of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them. He did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. I love this. By the time the disciples get to shore, Jesus already has the fire going. Jesus already has the fish cooked. Jesus has already prepared the bread, and they sit down and he says, let's have breakfast. Like, I can't wait till one day I get to have a breakfast burrito with Jesus. Like, is there a better food item on the planet than a good breakfast burrito? Like, get some brisket in it. It's close to lunchtime, guys. I'm getting hungry. But here's the thing I don't want us to miss here. They show up. Jesus already has everything prepared. And then he says, why don't you bring some of your fish too? Jesus didn't need the disciples to make that breakfast, but he did invite them to be a part of it. Jesus doesn't need us to bring heaven to earth. He's going to do it on his own, but he's inviting us to be a part of it. And in the same way, they only had those fish because Jesus gave them those fish when he told them to throw the net on the other side. In the same way, Jesus has given us so many things, and all he's asking us to do is bring them. I heard a counselor recently say that for married couples, that you are not responsible for your spouse's insecurity. Right? Like that's something that they have to figure out. But it is an invitation for you to join them and meet that need. Which I love that picture because it reminds us that we can't control how other people feel, but those are moments where we're invited in to meet a need. But we don't have control over how to bring heaven to earth. That's not something we even have the capability to do on our own, but Jesus is inviting us to be a part of it. He invites them to that meal, reconnect. Now we're going to read the last few verses here. This, of course, is, you've heard this a million times. Verse 15. When they had eaten breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said to him, "you know that I love you." "Feed my lambs," he told him. A second time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," he said to him, "you know that I love you." "Shepherd my sheep," he told him. He asked him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved that he asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." "Feed my sheep," Jesus said. "Truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you would tie your belt and walk wherever you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will tie you and carry you to where you don't want to go." He said this to indicate by what kind of death Peter would glorify God. After saying this, he told him, "Follow me." So as they get done with their meal, I'm sure they're sitting around talking, lots to catch up on. And all of a sudden, Jesus says, "Hey, Peter, do you love me? Do you love me more than you love these disciples?" Peter says, "Yes, you know that I do. Feed my sheep." A little while later, "Peter, do you love me more than these other disciples?" "Jesus, you know I do. Shepherd my sheep." Third time, like you can hear like even the breaking of Peter's heart. You know that I love you. What is Jesus doing? I mean, you don't have to be a theologian. You've probably heard a million sermons on this passage before. Well, you know, Jesus now is sitting by a charcoal fire asking Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" Because the last time Peter was around a charcoal fire, he denied Jesus 3 times. What is Jesus doing here? Jesus is forgiving sins. And I think it's so important because when I think of forgiving sins, the way I think of it and the way the Bible talks about it are 2 totally different things. Because when I think about forgiveness of sins, I can think of, okay, I'm standing in a courtroom, God the Father is the judge, and my whole life's on display. It's full of sin. I've been pronounced guilty and ready for punishment. And then Jesus stands up and said, "I've already paid the debt." And in that moment, the judge says, "All right, the debt's been paid. You are forgiven." Now, there's some truth to that, but there's so much more when the Bible talks about forgiveness of sins. Because what N.T. Wright, who's the foremost New Testament scholar of our day, he wrote a book called The Day the Revolution Began. And in that book, he talks about the fact that when we talk about forgiveness of sin, it's that picture of the polluted world where all of a sudden sin has been wiped away. It's not just a legal pronouncement like, "Hey, you are guilty, but I'm not going to make you pay for your debt." It's not only are you not guilty, I'm cleansing you from sin. The idea is that forgiveness isn't just forgiveness, it's a healing too. It's a fundamental change in our identity. You've been forgiven of your sin, and now you can be who God created you to be. Does this make sense? Because I know sometimes people say, "I've forgiven you," but then I'm carrying around a whole lot of guilt and shame over that thing that I did to them, the way I hurt them, the way I wounded them. And what Jesus wants to do is to forgive and to heal. And N.T. Wright says there's like 3 different aspects to this. One is the relational aspect. Right? Because when you forgave sins in the temple, it was so you could sit and have a meal with God. What is Jesus doing with Peter here? He's forgiving him and healing him so that their relationship can be restored. We can only have relationship with Jesus because he's forgiven us and healed us from our sins. But it's not just relational, it's vocational. Right? Like now we've been cleansed, we've been forgiven, we've been healed for a purpose, to go out and bring heaven to earth. He's saying, "Hey, you have a job. Feed my sheep, shepherd my people." But the third part is it's also communal. This happens with other people around. Like he's restoring him back to this community of people. the forgiveness of sins is not just, hey, you don't have to pay anymore. It's that it's been wiped away, you've been made new, and you're now a part of God's people. Is this making sense? Is this connecting? To me, I think this just has such radical implications. Because the reality is, I actually don't know a lot of your stories. I don't know how many of you are in the middle of facing an addiction to alcohol or to painkillers or to pornography. I don't know how many of you are self-medicating with online shopping or social media or Netflix. But I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of us in here who know what it's like to feel guilt and shame, and we want to go back fishing because we don't feel like we've actually been made new. And what Jesus wants to do is to heal and forgive us, to make us new. What does that practically look like? Not just to receive a forgiveness sentence, but to be transformed through forgiveness and healing. I think Jesus is inviting us to do a number of things today. The first one, he's inviting us to go back. Notice he brings them back to the charcoal fire. It's got to be instant that Peter smells that charcoal, it brings him back. I don't know how it is for you. Smells they transport me. In fact, I've thought all week what is a masculine way to say what I'm about to say, but I've just be honest with you. I was at Bath and Body Works a couple weeks ago, and there's a candle that I found that smells exactly like my favorite resort that we ever went on vacation at. And I found it, actually, I loved it so much, my wife went out and got a second one. Because you know what, this is my morning routine. Get up, get the kids off to school. My wife goes to the gym. I have the house to myself. So I like to, it's clean. I like candles. I spend my time with Jesus. And so now I'm with Jesus in my favorite place because of that smell. But here, when Peter's transported because of the smell, it's not to a good place, it's to a painful place. Jesus took him back, but not to take him back to condemn him or to throw on more shame. Jesus took him back to heal him. See, we cannot be healed from what we avoid. Sometimes we have to go back. We have to process through it. And again, like all of us, we have these labels and identities that we are living out that were put on us by other people or even by ourselves. But maybe for some of you walking, you feel like a failure because school didn't turn out the way you expected. Your business didn't survive the way you wanted. Your marriage ended in divorce, and so you have labeled yourself as a failure. Can I just tell you, failure is an event. It is not a person. But there are other labels people put on us. It could be your boss who said, you'll never amount to anything. A teacher who said, why can't you just be like normal kids? A parent who said, I wish I never had kids. A spouse who said, I wish I never married you. All of a sudden, these become labels that we wear. We're walking in guilt and shame. We don't feel like a new creation because we've been carrying this for years. Can I just tell you one thing that I'm learning is that it's for me, those labels feel like they're tattooed on my chest, but the reality is they're just Post-it notes that have been put there. And what Jesus wants to do is to heal you, to take those Post-it notes away so that you find your identity in who he says you are, not what anybody else says you are. He wants to offer that healing and forgiveness that requires us to go back. But he also invites us to go out. Because he kept telling him, he's like, hey, feed my sheep, shepherd my sheep. There's still work for you to do. The healing comes because there is work that needs to be done. You know, there's a lot of times in the church world we talk about, let's be the hands and feet of Jesus. What happened to the hands and feet of Jesus? They were nailed to the cross. Sometimes being the hands and feet of Jesus is painful, and it's work, and it's not always a breeze. But you know what else those nail-scarred hands did? When Jesus shared him with his disciples, it led them to belief. And I'm wondering if there's people who need to see your scars, to know that what God did in your life, he can do in their life. That if God can work and heal you, that he can heal them. I mean, I've needed to see scars on other people's hands to know I'm not alone. Could we be the kind of people who are sent out not hiding our scars because we think they make us look hideous, not hiding our secrets and our sin, but being willing to share, this is what God has done in my life at my lowest moment so other people could experience forgiveness and healing. I didn't want to cry headed into Q&A because there's no good transition out of that. But I have one more point I want to make, but I do want to leave time for Q&A. So if you have questions, here's kind of our guidelines here. Questions, not comments. Relatively quick. I mean, if you need to explain it a little bit, you can. But then also relevant to what we're talking about today. Does anybody want to raise their hands to ask a question? We got one in the back. Where did he go to get healed? Around that fire is where Jesus did his healing work. And I know, like, when we talk about needing to be healed, for some of us, going back to that fire, that's hard work. Like going back to certain moments in our life where we failed, we messed up, we made a mistake, or that these things were done to us. I want to be honest with you. Sometimes that requires like walking through with a licensed counselor to do. Like, I am not a licensed counselor. I am your friend. I am your pastor, but these are heavy things to deal with. You know, I was talking to somebody after the first service, and sometimes we like see moments like this, and it feels like everything happens in a moment. And we're all just waiting for the moment where everything clicks in. But the reality is this is work that obviously like happens over time. And sometimes the miracle happens in a moment, but we don't see the 3 years, the 5 years of work that happened before that. Like, how many business leaders, if you ever read business books, they'll talk about the overnight success. They don't tell you about the 20 years they put in before that. They always say, I'm an overnight success, 20 years in the making. Sometimes our healing, we want it to come in the moment, but it comes through doing the hard work over the years and continually surrendering that to Jesus. Great question. I want to end with one final invitation Jesus makes to us. He's invited us to go back. He's invited us to go out. The third invitation I see here is an invitation to go together. See, like growing up, like when I heard the story, I always assumed like they finished breakfast and Jesus is like, hey, Peter, can you come over here? I need to talk to you in private for a moment. But that's not the scene. They're sitting around the fire with all the disciples. Like that, to me, that's mortifying. And Jesus begins to ask these questions. But remember, he's not trying to bring shame. He's trying to bring healing. So what is he doing? I think it's a reminder to all of us that our healing happens when we're in community. James says, confess your sins to one another so that you may be healed. You ever hear the phrase before, we are hurt in community and we are healed in community? It's just so true. Like, I've been pastor for long enough now. I have this conversation over and over and over again. I see people who walk in. They walk in because they were wounded from another church experience. Maybe it was a member of the church who hurt them, a pastor, some kind of spiritual leader. And even for someone like that to walk through the doors of a church is a huge step. But I've seen people who maybe come in and they sit in the back and they're like kind of on the edges. But the longer they're around other believers, the longer they're around this community, all of a sudden they start to get connected and involved. And some of those same people who walked in these doors broken, wounded, thinking they would never get over it, are now leading at a high level. They're leading life groups. They're serving other people, and they have the scars to show you that healing can happen. And I think the same is true for all of us. Listen, if you're here today and you're wrestling through some church hurt, like I wish I could tell you that if you like make Bridgepoint your church home, that you'll never get hurt. That is not true. Because we're messy people. I mess up. We all mess up. But what I can tell you is that avoiding the healing is not going to help. We have to be in community so we can be healed in community. So we're going to continue our time of worship with a time of communion. We have 4 communion stations around the room. On one half of the table are the communion elements, the crackers and the juice, the body and the blood of Jesus. On the other half, we have our prayer elements. We have candles, because throughout church history, that's represented offering a prayer to God. We also have slips of paper that you can just write a prayer to God on and put those in a prayer jar. And as we have this time, I have 2 questions I want us to be considering, seeking Jesus for the answers. The first one is this: where do I need to go? Like for some of us here today, we need to go back to the place of wounding, and it's painful and it's uncomfortable. We have to go back so we can receive healing there. For some of us, we have to go out. Like we have to start serving and start looking out. Like we weren't just healed for our sake. We were healed to be a part of a community of people who are bringing heaven to earth. Maybe for some of us, we have to go together to make a commitment. I'm not talking about like, come back to church next week. No, like go have Mexican food with somebody. Grab coffee. Be a part of a community of people who are going to bring healing in your life. The second thing, who needs to see my scars? Are there people in your life that maybe they've been hinting they're going through something and you've been afraid to share because of what they might think of you, that you might feel shame or condemned? But maybe there's people in your life that need to hear your real story so that they can find forgiveness and healing as well. All across this room, would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me? Jesus, we just come before you right now. So thankful. Thankful for forgiveness. Thankful for healing. Thankful that you know who we are, that our identity is found in you. And so I pray for every person in here who's been told they're a new creation, but they're still living out their old identity. That today they would see you on the shore. They would hear your voice. They would come back to you. I pray for those who need to go out, who need to share, that you would give us the boldness and strength to be able to share our scars. For those who are on the margins because they're still healing from that hurt, that they would find that healing in community. That as we take these steps today, Jesus, would you meet us here to shape us and change us, become more like you. It's in your name I pray.